Poor girl kissed a stranger to spite her ex. She had no idea he was a millionaire CEO, and what he did next. She didn't mean to kiss him. Not in front of the man who broke her heart. Not while her ex held someone else's hand and called her my love in a voice he never used with her. It was a reckless moment, lips colliding with a stranger's, just to prove she hadn't been left behind. What she didn't expect was that he'd kiss her back. Not awkwardly, not out of pity, but like someone who'd been waiting. And in that instant, everything changed. Because sometimes it doesn't take years to fall in love. Sometimes it just takes one kiss. The right kiss. At the wrong time, Lucy Cooper was having the kind of day that made her question every decision she'd ever made. First, her morning coffee exploded in the microwave like a personal betrayal. Then, her editor made her rewrite an entire article because of a typo that turned out to be a crumb on his screen. And now, she was standing 10 feet from the most humiliating chapter of her life. Ryan, her ex, smiling like a man who'd never whispered, "I'm just not ready." Smiling like she hadn't once memorized the freckles on his shoulder. He was holding the hand of someone new. A woman whose laugh was syrupy and loud, like she wanted the world to know she'd already won. Lucy didn't even have time to run. "Oh, Lucy," Ryan said, with a voice full of fake surprise and a smile so smug it scraped her ribs. "You still live around here?" It wasn't curiosity, it was victory. Samantha, the new girlfriend, with her professionally curled hair and surgically sweet tone, added, "You look exactly the same, like nothing's changed." Lucy smiled, the kind of smile that hurts. "And you look like a Snapchat filter that escaped into real life." The air shifted. Samantha's jaw twitched. Ryan laughed under his breath like he wanted to clap. But then, with her dignity unraveling thread by thread, Samantha leaned in and whispered, "Oh, Lucy, you're still single, aren't you?" Lucy didn't answer. She didn't need to. Because in that moment, before her brain could warn her heart, before common sense could speak, a warm, steady hand slipped around her waist. "Sorry I'm late, sweetheart," a deep voice murmured at her ear. It wasn't familiar, but it was calm and claiming. She turned and saw him, tall, sharp-suited, smiling like the chaos didn't faze him. As a stranger, but he looked at her like they'd known each other in another lifetime. Then, without thinking, she kissed him. It wasn't a soft kiss. It was fire meeting gasoline, a declaration of rebellion. And the craziest part? He kissed her back. Not hesitantly, but fully. When she pulled away, Ryan's face had frozen in that half-smirk, half-regret expression she'd once dreamed of seeing. And Samantha looked like she'd swallowed her own lipstick. Lucy took a breath, straightened her spine. "So, what were you asking again?" But the stranger wasn't done. He slid his arm more tightly around her and said, casually, "We still have to pick out the wedding ring, remember?" Lucy blinked. "Wedding? What?" Before she could ask, he was already guiding her away, cool as the wind. And as the crowd faded behind them, Lucy turned and whispered, "Who the hell are you?" The man smiled, the kind of smile that made you believe in plot twists. "Nicholas Scott," he said. "You really don't know me?" She blinked again, felt her stomach drop. "Nicholas Scott. As in that Nicholas Scott? The billionaire. The CEO. The man who didn't need to play pretend, but just did. And somehow, she had just kissed him like her whole world depended on it." Chapter 1. The kiss that changed everything. She didn't know whether to scream, laugh, or collapse. So instead, she stared at him like he'd just dropped out of a Marvel movie. Nicholas Scott. The Nicholas Scott. She blinked once, then again. Maybe this was a very elaborate stress dream. Maybe in 5 seconds she'd wake up in her studio apartment with her forehead stuck to a half-eaten grilled cheese. But he was still there. Tall, calm, slightly amused like he'd done this before. Nicholas glanced at her t-shirt, a unicorn riding a slice of pizza, and tilted his head. "Nice shirt," he said. "Very anti-corporate rebellion meets Lisa Frank." Lucy folded her arms. You've got some nerve, says the woman who kissed me in public. You kissed me back. It would have been rude not to. She opened her mouth, then closed it again, because technically that was true. Still, her pulse hadn't calmed down since he'd taken her hand and dragged her out of the jewelry store like they were in some kind of indie rom-com. No, they were standing by the valet desk, her entire life flipped upside down in the span of 5 minutes. Look, she said, trying to find some grip on the situation. I didn't mean for any of that to happen. I just panicked. You don't owe me anything. Thanks for helping, but I have a proposition. She froze. The way he said it wasn't flirtatious. It was businesslike, efficient, like he was closing a deal. Excuse me? A proposition, he repeated, slipping his hands into his coat pockets. We both need something. I need a girlfriend, for optics, and you need a way to look completely over your ex. I say we help each other. Lucy laughed. This is a joke, right? Oh. And he said it so plainly, so devoid of irony, that it knocked the humor right out of her. Nicholas gestured to a black SUV that had just pulled up. Can I offer you a coffee? Or do you only accept beverages from emotionally unavailable baristas? She should have walked away. She really should have. But there was something about him, not just the wealth or the looks. It was the stillness, the way he watched her without needing to speak. Lucy followed him into the SUV. Inside the car, she clutched her bag like it was her last link to reality. So let me get this straight. You want me to pretend to be your girlfriend because your reputation needs it? He nodded once. There's a charity gala next week. My father expects me to bring someone. And if I don't, I'll be set up with the daughter of a French banking tycoon who thinks feminism is a skincare line. Lucy blinked. And I'm the solution to that problem? You kissed me in front of 30 witnesses. The internet's probably already spinning theories. He looked at her, calm as ever. Might as well ride the wave. I'm not riding the wave of anything, she snapped. I don't even own heels. I'll buy you some. I live in a studio apartment with a broken toaster. I live in a penthouse with an espresso machine that costs more than a car. It balances out. Lucy narrowed her eyes. Why me? Nicholas leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. Because you didn't know who I was. Because you kissed me without expectation. And because, despite the chaos, you didn't fake anything. She opened her mouth to argue, then stopped. That last line hit her harder than she wanted to admit. They pulled up to a cafe in the West Loop. Sleek, quiet, expensive. He led her to a corner table with a view of the city. I'm offering 1 month, Nicholas said, stirring his coffee. In that time, you'll attend a few events with me, play the part convincingly, and in return, he reached into his coat and slid something across the table. A contract. Lucy picked it up. It was professional. Numbered clauses. A confidentiality section. Even a clause for unexpected emotional complications. She looked up. Are you serious? He sipped his espresso. Deadly. Her fingers hovered over the page. 1 month of pretending. 1 month of high heels, fake smiles, and socialite galas. In exchange, a new job, a reset, a little revenge. I don't trust you, she said softly. I wouldn't expect you to. You could be some villain in disguise. I'm flattered. She bit her lip. And if I say no? Nicholas leaned back. Then we both go on with our lives. You return to your editor, who can't tell the difference between a comma and a coffee stain. I get reintroduced to Olivia Leclerc and her 12 tiny purse dogs. Lucy exhaled, looked out the window. What would she even be protecting by walking away? Her pride? That was already shattered. Her routine? She didn't even like it. And this? This could be a new story. One she got to write. I have conditions, she said at last. Nicholas smiled. Naturally. First, I'm not your employee. I don't take orders. Understood. Second, I want a career out of this. I'm tired of being broke and underused. Nicholas reached into his coat again. Another paper. A letter of recommendation with his signature already on it. Addressed to the top 3 publishing firms in the city. You play your part, he said, and you'll never have to freelance again. Lucy stared at it, then at him. Finally, she extended her hand. Dio. He shook it, warm and steady, and that was the moment it became real. Later that night, Lucy sat in her apartment, staring at her reflection. You just agreed to fake date a billionaire, she muttered, despite an X, while wearing a unicorn shirt. She sighed. This was either the best or worst decision of her life. There would be cameras. There would be dinners. There would be people who looked at her like she didn't belong. But there would also be him, Nicholas Scott, the man who had kissed her like a promise, not a performance. And somehow, that terrified her the most. Contract of hearts. Lucy didn't expect the morning after to feel like a hangover, not from alcohol, but from adrenaline, shame, and the lingering taste of an impossible kiss. Her phone buzzed. Nicholas Scott. 11 a.m. My office. Don't wear a unicorn. She stared at the screen for a long moment, then flung the blanket over her face and groaned. What kind of man sends a summons like a king and critiques fashion like a judgmental fairy godmother? She showed up anyway. Nicholas's office was the kind of place that made people speak softer. All glass and skyline. The kind of cold perfection that didn't allow for emotion. Or crumbs. He didn't look up when she walked in. You're early, he said, flipping through papers. Ambitious. I like to appear professional before I inevitably disappoint, Lucy replied. He smirked, then gestured to the seat across from him. The folder was already waiting there, cream-colored, clean, intimidating. Contract, he said simply. We make it official. She opened it. 14 pages. 14 tiny reminders that she was now entering a world where relationships had clauses and love came with legal oversight. Clause 9. No falling in love. Lucy raised an eyebrow. That's cute. Did your last fake girlfriend write this one? I don't do this, Nicholas said without hesitation. She blinked. So I'm your first? You kissed me, he said smoothly. This is your fault. She rolled her eyes, but the heat rose to her cheeks anyway. He had a driver waiting, a boutique prepared, and a credit limit that made her nervous just by proximity. I'm not wearing anything that could bankrupt a small country, she warned. Nicholas didn't flinch. Too late. They walked into a store where the walls were lined with clothes she was sure had appeared on magazine covers. Everything was quiet, the kind of quiet that made her want to apologize for breathing. He leaned against a mirrored wall and watched her with an unreadable look. She came out of the fitting room in a green dress that hugged her like a secret. Nicholas looked up, didn't speak, didn't blink. She shifted, uncomfortable. Too much? No, he said softly. It's perfect. For a moment, Lucy didn't see the girl who'd been dumped in a jewelry store. She saw a version of herself she didn't recognize, elegant, powerful, seen. And she wondered, just for a second, if pretending could make a person real. In the car, she finally asked, Why me, Nicholas? He was quiet. And because you didn't know who I was, and you didn't care. She laughed bitterly. I care now. He looked at her. But not enough to be afraid. That's rare. Lucy stared out the window, uncertain if that was a compliment or a warning. The rooftop restaurant they stopped at had a view of the entire city. Nicholas pulled out her chair like a man who was used to being watched. Lucy raised an eyebrow. Practicing already? I'm a fast learner. They ordered wine, talked in circles, avoided the truth like it was contagious. Then he said it. My father wants control of the company. A family vote's coming. If I walk in alone, I lose. So you need stability, she murmured. Optics. I need a reason to make them back off. And I'm your shield? He leaned in. No, Lucy, you're my leverage. She hated how calm he was, how steady. She hated more that it was starting to make sense. By the end of the day, she'd signed, not because she trusted him, but because she didn't trust anyone else not to ruin her life more beautifully than he would. He dropped her off at her building with the kind of nonchalance only the wealthy could pull off. As she climbed her stairs alone, she thought of the clause again. No falling in love. Too late to worry about that, because the real danger wasn't love. It was how good he was at pretending it might already be there. Chapter 3. Champagne and Side Eyes. She thought she'd be nervous. But when the ballroom doors opened and every head turned toward them, Lucy felt something else entirely. Power. It was ridiculous. She was wearing borrowed diamonds, heels that threatened her life, and a dress chosen by a man she barely knew. But for one strange second, she belonged. At least she could fake it well enough to make others think she did. Nicholas's hand was steady at her lower back. Casual, reassuring, possessive. She didn't lean into him, but she didn't pull away either. The room buzzed as they walked in. It wasn't loud, just a quiet hum, like the sound before a storm. Lucy kept her smile soft and mysterious, the kind that made people ask questions they'd never be brave enough to voice. She could feel their stares. Who is she? Where did he find her? Why her? She didn't know either. But tonight, she was going to be the answer they didn't expect. Claire, Nicholas said with a professional warmth that sounded like a trained actor reciting a line. An elegant woman stepped forward, blonde, cold, the kind of beautiful that came with warning signs. Nicholas, she purred. You look dangerous tonight. Then her eyes flicked to Lucy, like a surgeon inspecting a rash. And this must be your surprise. Lucy smiled and extended her hand. Hi, I'm Lucy, his very real and not at all temporary girlfriend. Claire blinked once. Oh, how refreshing. She shook Lucy's hand like it was made of paper. Nicholas intervened smoothly. She's better than I deserve. Claire's eyebrows twitched. You're not usually so humble. He smiled. She's teaching me. Lucy wasn't sure if she wanted to kiss him or punch him. 10 minutes later, she was still reeling from the fact that she hadn't tripped, spilled wine, or insulted anyone's shoes. And then she heard it. That voice. The one she used to hear at 2 a.m., when her heart didn't know how to beat without him. Ryan. He was at the far side of the ballroom. Tux. Champagne flute. Perfectly rehearsed laugh. And Samantha, the same Samantha who had called Lucy brave for still shopping at thrift stores, stood beside him, clinging to his arm like a designer purse. Nicholas noticed her stillness. Problem? He asked quietly. Ex-boyfriend, she whispered. The one I kissed you to escape. Isht. Ah, he said, the catalyst. Lucy swallowed hard. Want to leave? She shook her head. No. Want to destroy him? She looked at Nicholas. For once, he didn't smile. He just held out his hand. Lucy took it. They walked across the room like it was a battlefield. Ryan turned just as they approached. Lucy gave him the sweetest smile she could fake. Ryan. Samantha. How unexpected. Ryan blinked. Lucy? He looked at Nicholas, then back at her. His expression morphed from confusion to something bitter and territorial. Samantha's mouth tightened. Nicholas didn't wait. She's with me, he said coolly. I thought that was obvious. Lucy didn't look at Ryan. She looked at Samantha. The woman who had once said, some people just don't have the face for love. So Lucy leaned into Nicholas, just slightly. He tightened his grip in response. Yes, Lucy said, we're very serious. Ryan opened his mouth, but no words came out. And in that silence, Lucy found something she hadn't had in months. Closure. Later, on the balcony, Nicholas handed her a flute of champagne. You did well, he said. Didn't trip once. High praise, she murmured. He didn't look at her, just stared out at the skyline. You wanted him to see you, he said softly. Lucy didn't answer right away. Then, because I wanted him to see what he lost. Nicholas turned to her. And did he? I don't know. She sipped her drink. But I finally did. That surprised him. He said nothing. She smiled faintly. It's funny, you know. I thought pretending to love someone would feel fake. But this. He trailed off. This feels worse? He asked. She nodded. Because it doesn't. Nicholas looked at her for a long time, then handed her his glass. Here's to emotional delusion. She laughed. She took the glass, clinked it against hers, and drank. That night, Nicholas dropped her off in front of her building. She reached for the door handle, then paused. "Thank you," she said, "for not letting me break." Nicholas looked at her, eyes unreadable. "I didn't do anything. You showed up." He was quiet, then, almost too softly, "I always will." She stepped out, closed the door, and didn't realize she was shaking until she reached the top of the stairs. Back in her apartment, she stood barefoot on the cold kitchen tiles, clutching the edge of the counter. Her reflection in the microwave showed a girl who looked like someone else. A girl who had been kissed like she mattered, held like she belonged, and now wanted to believe the lie more than the truth. Chapter 4. Lines we shouldn't cross. "Nicholas, this wasn't in the contract," she said, glaring at him over her coffee cup. He didn't look up from his tablet. "Technically, it was implied." She groaned, "Dinner with your family is not an implication. That's trauma." He looked at her then, the soft kind of look that felt like it could cut glass if it wanted to. "You'll be fine," he said. "You're good at pretending." She didn't respond, because part of her wasn't pretending anymore. The car ride was quiet. Manhattan passed by like a dream Lucy didn't belong in. Nicholas sat beside her like he owned the world. Which, to be fair, he kind of did. When the car pulled up in front of the Scott family estate, Lucy nearly lost her nerve. The house was less home and more palace, that once belonged to an oil tycoon who had a throne complex. Nicholas touched her arm before they stepped out. "Just follow my lead," he said. "I always do," she murmured. His mother was waiting in the grand foyer. A woman with silver hair, kind eyes, and a smile that felt like it had been practiced but perfected over time. "Nicholas," she said, pulling him into a hug. "Finally!" Then she turned to Lucy. "And you must be the miracle." Lucy froze. I wouldn't say miracle, maybe just temporary hallucination." To her surprise, the woman laughed. "I like her," she said, looping her arm through Lucy's. "Let's eat." Nicholas watched them go. Something soft flickered in his eyes. Dinner was surprisingly pleasant. They talked about books, childhood memories. Lucy even made Nicholas laugh with a story about her disastrous high school prom. His mother watched her closely, not with judgment, but with curiosity, like she was trying to place Lucy inside a future she hadn't imagined before. It wasn't until halfway through dessert that the air shifted. The door opened, and in walked the man Lucy didn't realize she'd been warned about. Nicholas's father, tall, sharp, the kind of presence that made even the Forks feel nervous. His eyes settled on her like she was something under a microscope. "So," he said, not bothering to sit, "this is her." Lucy straightened. "Hi, I'm Lucy." "I know your name," he replied. "What I don't know is your purpose." Nicholas tensed beside her. "She's here because I want her here." That's not an answer. Lucy felt the weight of the silence press against her chest. So she did what she always did when cornered. She smiled. "Love doesn't always make sense," she said. His father stared at her for a beat longer than necessary, then nodded once. "I suppose we'll see." After dinner, Nicholas walked her out to the garden. The sky above was velvet and quiet. "I'm sorry," he said suddenly. Lucy blinked. "For what?" "My father. He's difficult." She looked at him, the shadows softening his face. "No apology necessary. He just wants to protect what he's built." Nicholas exhaled slowly, "Even if it means destroying me in the process." That hurt more than she expected it to. They walked in silence for a few moments. Then he said it, so quietly she almost missed it. "You did well tonight." She turned to him. "You always say that." "Because it's always true." She didn't know what possessed her to reach out, maybe the wine or the cold or the unbearable closeness, but her hand found his. Warm, still. He didn't pull away. Instead, he looked down at their fingers. "You're good at pretending," he whispered. Lucy didn't answer. Because in that moment, hand in hand with the man she was only supposed to be acting with, she realized something terrifying. She wasn't pretending anymore. That night, back in her apartment, Lucy stared at the necklace he'd helped clasp around her neck before dinner. She hadn't wanted to wear it. He'd insisted. It brings out your eyes. She didn't understand how someone so cold could say things like that so easily, or why she wanted to believe he meant them. A knock at the door. She jumped. It was past midnight. She opened it without thinking. Nicholas stood there, jacket in hand, hair slightly out of place. "I can't sleep," he said. She blinked. "So, you came here." "I didn't know where else to go." They stood in silence. Then Lucy stepped aside and let him in. They didn't kiss. But when he sat on her couch and fell asleep with his head tilted back, she brought him a blanket. And for the first time in a long time, she felt less alone. She stayed on the floor beside the couch until morning. Eyes wide open. Heart too loud? Because lines once crossed don't disappear, and she wasn't sure they could ever go back now. Things we don't say out loud. The couch creaked beneath his weight as Nicholas stirred awake. Lucy was already dressed. Sweatshirt, messy bun, coffee mug in hand, watching him from the kitchen like she hadn't spent the entire night pretending to read while silently memorizing the way he slept. "You snore," she lied. He blinked. "Impossible. I'm genetically flawless. Not even your DNA can save you from mouth breathing." Nicholas ran a hand through his hair, blinking against the morning light. "I didn't mean to crash here." "I know." He looked at her, a little longer than necessary. "Still, thanks." She sipped her coffee. "Don't mention it, literally, ever." That evening they were scheduled to attend a charity gala, another swirl of camera flashes and champagne-slick smiles. Lucy was starting to get used to the rhythm of Nicholas's world. Enter together, pretend like you're in love, laugh at things that aren't funny, survive the night. This one, however, had an unexpected twist. She saw the danger the moment they stepped through the ballroom doors. Olivia. Tall, elegant, dressed in a silver gown that clung like it had been born on her skin. Lucy didn't need a resume to know who she was. She could see it in the way Nicholas stiffened beside her. "Ex," she whispered. He nodded once. "Of course," she muttered. Olivia approached with the kind of smile designed to ruin someone's day. "Nicholas," she cooed. "You're looking unexpectedly domestic." Nicholas's grip on Lucy's waist tightened, not protectively, but like he needed grounding. "This is Lucy," he said, "my girlfriend." Olivia's gaze scanned Lucy from head to toe, pausing just long enough to twist the knife. "Fresh." Lucy smiled. "You know, I was just thinking the same thing about you, but in a more expired way." Nicholas choked on a laugh. Olivia tilted her head. "How adorable. I hope she knows what she's signed up for." Lucy looked her dead in the eye. "He came with a manual." Olivia's expression flickered. "Did it include the part where he breaks things when he's bored?" Nicholas stepped in, his voice razor-sharp. "Olivia!" But Lucy placed a hand on his arm. "It's fine, because this wasn't about Olivia." "Not really. It was about every woman who had ever looked at her and seen a girl playing dress-up." Lucy wasn't pretending anymore, and Olivia could feel it. Later that night on the balcony, Lucy found herself staring at the city. Nicholas joined her in silence, 2 glasses in hand. "Thanks," she murmured, taking one. "She used to make me feel like I was made of glass," he said softly. "Pretty. Fragile. Lucy turned to him. "Why'd you stay?" He was quiet for a long time. "Because I was afraid being alone meant I deserved it." The words hit her harder than she expected. "I know what that's like," she whispered. He looked at her. "Yeah." Lucy nodded, eyes still fixed on the skyline. "My ex made me feel like I was optional, like I was someone you leave when you finally upgrade your life." She felt him shift closer, not touching, just present. "You're not optional," he said. It wasn't flirty. It wasn't smooth. It was honest. And it undid her. They didn't speak much on the ride home. The quiet wasn't heavy, just real. Honest. Their silences had started to feel like conversations. Nicholas walked her to her apartment door, then hesitated. "You okay?" he asked. Lucy nodded. "Yeah, Tonight felt different." He looked at her. "It was." She swallowed. Why do I feel like I'm starting to forget which parts are real? Nicholas didn't answer, but his eyes, so tired, so guarded, said it for him. Maybe, he said at last, because some parts are. And then, as if he knew it was too dangerous to linger, he left. That night, Lucy sat on her bed, staring at the necklace she never took off. She thought about Olivia, about Ryan, about the way Nicholas looked at her like she was something he never expected to want. She remembered the kiss, the fake one, and how nothing about it felt fake anymore. She pulled her phone from the nightstand and opened her notes app, then typed one line. "We made rules, we're both breaking them." She stared at the words until sleep finally took her. Chapter 6, A Proposal Without a Ring. Lucy was still adjusting to the idea that she wasn't just a placeholder anymore. There was a rhythm to this strange life now. Interviews she declined, headlines she ignored, photographers she learned to half smile for without looking too stiff. But nothing prepared her for what Nicholas said one sleepy Thursday afternoon while reviewing the details of an upcoming charity fundraiser. "I want you to move in." She blinked. Like, move in, move in? Nicholas didn't look up from his laptop. "It's time." Lucy leaned forward, voice flat. "Time for what exactly?" "For my father to believe we're serious." She let out a dry laugh. "So this is what commitment looks like in billionaire terms, location-based manipulation." He closed the laptop then, looked her straight in the eyes. "You said you wanted a better job. Exposure, resources, influence. I'm offering you all of that, but I need you closer." Lucy crossed her arms. "That's not a proposal, that's a chess move." He smiled. "Sometimes they're the same thing." She said yes the way you say yes to a dare. Not because she was brave, because she was tired of pretending she wasn't curious. Nicholas sent a car, had her things moved, gave her the second bedroom, "Unless you change your mind," he'd said, voice teasing but eyes too serious. She did, at least not that night. 3 days into living with him, she realized the man was a machine. His closet was organized by season, then fabric, then color. He drank black coffee at 5:00 a.m., read the newspaper in silence, had a standing desk and a face that didn't know how to smile before 9. Lucy, on the other hand, spilled cereal on her pajamas and fell asleep with her laptop playing cat videos on her chest. The contrast was so absurd it became funny. Until it wasn't. Until she started noticing the way he made space for her toothbrush. The way he left notes like, "They put too much sugar in your latte today? New barista?" The way he'd touch the small of her back when they passed each other in the hallway and say nothing. Then came the dinner. The one with him, Nicholas' father, the man who hadn't been convinced by the bookstore story. This time, the table was smaller, the stakes higher. Mr. Whitmore was there too, a sharp-dressed titan with eyes that cataloged weaknesses like a banker calculated debt. "Lucy," he said smoothly, shaking her hand. "I've been hearing your name a lot lately." "Hopefully in full sentences," she replied. He chuckled. "I admire your wit." Mr. Scott, however, was less amused. "So," he said, after the main course had been cleared, "you live together now?" Lucy nodded. "Yes." "And yet," he continued, knife gliding through air, "no formal announcement, no engagement, just headlines." Nicholas's jaw clenched. Lucy looked between them and said carefully, "Some stories don't need declarations to be true." Mr. Scott studied her like a scientist might study an unfamiliar virus. "Or, they need proof." Then he looked at Nicholas. "Make a decision. Soon, or others will make it for you." After the dinner, Nicholas didn't say a word during the entire ride home. Lucy stared out the window, her throat dry. Inside the apartment, he went straight to the kitchen, poured himself a drink, and didn't offer her one. Finally, she broke the silence. "So what happens now?" He turned to her, jaw tense. "Now we do what we were always going to do." "And what's that?" He met her eyes. "Make it real." Lucy blinked. "What?" Nicholas took a deep breath. "I need you to stay with me for another month." She stared at him. "We already live together." "I mean publicly, as in let people believe what they already think." She frowned. Are you asking me to marry you? He hesitated. Not officially. Oh wow, she muttered. A proposal without a ring. How romantic. It's not a proposal, it's a strategy. Lucy turned away, laughter sharp and hurt. You always have a strategy. He stepped toward her. I always have something to lose. She looked at him then, really looked, and saw it. The fear behind the arrogance. The boy beneath the billionaire. You think letting people see the truth makes you weak, she said softly. He didn't reply. That night she couldn't sleep. The city hummed outside. The contract sat in a drawer. And Lucy lay in bed, realizing she was in love with a man who didn't know how to be loved back. The next morning, she opened the drawer, pulled out the contract, and wrote something in the margin. But not forever, just long enough for you to believe it's possible. She left it on his pillow, and walked into the day like a woman who knew how the story might end, but wasn't afraid to live it anyway. Chapter 7. The lie that felt like love. The media had stopped calling it fake. That was the first sign something had shifted. The headlines no longer used quotation marks around the word relationship. They didn't need to. The photos said enough. Lucy laughing in Nicholas's arms. Nicholas brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. Their eyes locked like no one else existed. It was supposed to be staged, but it never looked like it, and that's what made it dangerous. Lucy woke up to the sound of her phone buzzing. She squinted at the screen. New message from Olivia. You really think he's not still playing you? No punctuation, just poison? Lucy deleted it, but her chest ached. Not because she believed it, because part of her already feared it. Later that afternoon, Nicholas picked her up in a car that probably cost more than her childhood home. You okay? He asked. Peachy, she lied. He studied her face a moment too long, then drove in silence. They arrived at a rooftop luncheon, charity, apparently, hosted by Mr. Whitmore's foundation. Everything sparkled, the skyline, the glasses, the gossip. And then, as if on cue, Samantha appeared. Ryan's fiancée. The girl who once asked Lucy if love after 40 was still possible. She looked at Lucy's outfit like it had personally offended her. Well, Samantha said, fake smile in place. You clean up. Surprisingly well. Lucy didn't flinch. So do you. Almost didn't recognize you without the venom. Nicholas stifled a laugh. Samantha turned her attention to him. Still pretending this is more than temporary? Nicholas's voice was calm, deadly. You're right. It was temporary. Then she made it permanent. Samantha blinked. Excuse me? She made me fall in love, he said, not looking at Lucy, not touching her, just declaring it into the space between them like it was fact. Lucy froze. Samantha laughed. But the damage had already been done. You didn't have to say that, Lucy whispered later as they walked toward the elevator. Say what? That you're in love with me. Nicholas didn't respond. You were just trying to win. Still, he said nothing. Weren't you? He finally looked at her. Does it matter? She blinked. It does, to me. That night, Lucy sat at the vanity, staring at herself. Lipstick half smeared, eyes tired, necklace still glinting beneath her collarbone. A gift from a man who never gave anything without a reason. She thought about walking away, about ending it. She reached for the drawer, touched the edge of the contract, but didn't open it. The next morning, Nicholas wasn't in the apartment. A note sat on the counter in his familiar, sharp handwriting. Meeting with Whitmore, back at 2. Don't wait up. She didn't wait, but she did pace. And when he finally returned, something in his face had changed. You look like someone died, she said softly. He poured a drink, downed it. They want you at the board dinner, he said. Why? Because Whitmore thinks you're marketable. She laughed bitterly. So I'm a press asset now? Nicholas didn't respond. She stepped closer. Why do you keep doing this? He looked at her. Doing what? Using me. That's when he broke. I'm not using you. Then what are you doing? I'm trying to survive. Lucy went still. I don't know how to do this, he said, voice breaking like ice under weight. I don't know how to let someone in and not lose control. She didn't know what to say, because she felt the same, and that terrified her. That night, he didn't sleep on the couch. He knocked on her door, and for the first time, she didn't tell him to go away. They didn't kiss, didn't make promises. They just lay there, close, silent, trembling, like two people trying to stay afloat in a story that had grown too real. And somewhere between midnight and morning, Lucy whispered what neither of them could say out loud. I think I already crossed the line. Chapter 8. The kiss that wasn't fake. Lucy used to think there were two kinds of kisses. The ones you forget, and the ones that rewire your DNA. She never meant to collect the second kind. But Nicholas Scott had a way of crossing lines before she could name them. It was the middle of the night. Their rooms were quiet, separate, but his footsteps stopped outside hers. A soft knock. She didn't answer. Then, slowly, cautiously, the door creaked open. Nicholas stood there, in pajama pants and nothing else, every line of him shadowed and uncertain. Not powerful, not composed, not the billionaire who could command entire rooms. Just a man. Lucy, he said, barely above a whisper. She didn't say a word. He stepped in, stopped at the edge of her bed. You don't have to pretend with me, she whispered. I'm not pretending, he said. Then, silence. Until Nicholas reached down, gently, like touching something sacred, and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. She leaned into it. And when he bent down, it wasn't for the contract. Or for Whitmore. Or his father. It wasn't strategy. It was surrender. The kiss was nothing like their first one. That one had been desperate, explosive, survival dressed up as seduction. But this one was slow, like a confession, like an apology for every time they'd lied to themselves. The next morning, neither of them spoke about it. Not when they made coffee, not when they left for the Whitmore board brunch, but their silences were different now, full of things unsaid, not because they didn't mean them, but because saying them out loud would mean nothing could ever go back to how it was. At the brunch, Lucy wore a white silk blouse Nicholas had chosen. You look devastating, he whispered before they got out of the car. She rolled her eyes. Careful, flattery might make me believe this is real. He looked at her, serious. Maybe it is. Mr. Whitmore's rooftop terrace was filled with investors, politicians, old money types with names that could end careers. Nicholas stood beside Lucy like armor. Smile, he said under his breath. Only if you say something worth smiling about. He grinned, and for once it reached his eyes. Then Mr. Scott arrived. Still cold, still unreadable. He shook Lucy's hand with the same forced warmth he used on senators. So he said to Nicholas after a series of obligatory pleasantries, "Are you ready?" "For what?" Nicholas asked evenly. "To make it official." Lucy blinked. "What's he talking about?" she asked Nicholas later when they were alone. He looked exhausted. "My father thinks if we announce an engagement, the scrutiny will stop." She backed away. "You're not serious." You've... Nicholas sighed. "I don't know anymore." Lucy felt her heart splinter. "I thought this wasn't supposed to go that far." "It wasn't. So why does it feel like we already crossed that line?" That night, she stood at the window of his penthouse. The city was quiet. Nicholas came up behind her. "I meant it," he said softly. "But the kiss, the way I looked at you today." She turned. He was inches away. "Say it, Nicholas." He swallowed. "I'm falling in love with you." Her heart stopped. She wanted to say it back. He wanted to throw the whole agreement in the fireplace and write a new one with just one line. "We choose each other." But her fear got there first. It started as a lie, she said. "What if we don't know how to be real?" Nicholas stepped closer. "Then let's learn." And when he kissed her again, it wasn't just a kiss. It was the moment everything unraveled. The moment they stopped acting. The moment they gave in. Chapter 9. The moment it all fell apart. They say when something feels too good to be true, it usually is. Lucy had always hated that saying, because it meant hope was foolish, and love, temporary. But somewhere in the hollow silence of that Sunday morning, she began to understand it. Nicholas had fallen asleep beside her, one hand tangled in the hem of her shirt, the other resting between their pillows like he hadn't meant to reach for her, but couldn't help it. Lucy watched him breathe, steady, slow, and for a dangerous second, she let herself believe it. She believed that this wasn't just a contract with good lighting, that the kisses were real, that he had stopped calculating long enough to feel. But reality has a cruel sense of timing, and it came in the form of a phone call. Nicholas had stepped out to take it, left the door ajar. Lucy wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but she heard it anyway. I know, Olivia, but she wasn't supposed to mean anything. Her stomach turned. She pressed her hand to her mouth. Don't make this more complicated than it already is, he continued. This arrangement's almost over. Arrangement. Not relationship. Not love. Just a deal. And Lucy, the fool who let herself forget. When he returned, she was sitting on the edge of the bed. Expression unreadable. He smiled like nothing had happened. You hungry? She looked up, and for the first time, saw right through him. How long were you going to pretend? Nicholas froze. What? I heard you, she said, voice low. On the phone. He blinked. Lucy, You told her I wasn't supposed to mean anything. The silence between them was deafening. Nicholas ran a hand through his hair. That was before... Before what? She snapped. Before I started believing it? Before I moved into your life like some charity project with lipstick? He flinched. It wasn't like that. It was exactly like that. She stood. I was the girl who made your father nervous and your investors curious. I was your leverage, your story, your performance. Nicole stepped forward. Lucy, I didn't know I'd feel this way. She laughed, short and painful. You know what the worst part is? She whispered. I wanted it to be real so badly I would have stayed, even after the contract. He went still. I would have chosen you, no deal, no clause, just us. Tears pricked at her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Nicholas looked wrecked. I'm sorry, he said, voice breaking. I didn't mean for it to go this far. And yet it did, she said. Then turned and walked away. The headlines came fast. Nicholas Scott and Lucy Cooper split after whirlwind romance. Sources confirm it was all an arrangement. The photo they used was of her smiling, of him staring. It didn't matter that the smile had been real. Not when the story was over. Lucy moved out that same night. She left the necklace on the counter. Didn't leave a note. Didn't need to. For 3 days, she ignored every call. From Nicholas, from Whitmore's people, even from Samantha, who texted, "Told you so." Lucy deleted it, but the ache didn't go away. Because love, when it dies, doesn't just vanish. It rots slowly inside the walls of everything you thought was safe. Then, on the 4th day, she received one message that broke her. From Ryan, "You deserved better, even from me." She didn't reply, not because she forgave him, but because, somehow, his lie had still hurt less than Nicholas's truth. That night, she walked past the jewelry store again. The necklace, her necklace, was back in the display window. Returned, polished, priced, like it had never meant anything. She stood there in the cold, staring at it, wondering how something so small could hold so many memories. A stranger walked past and said, "Beautiful piece, huh?" Lucy nodded, but didn't look away, because that was the thing about beautiful things. They hurt the most when they're no longer yours. Chapter 10. The walk back to him. Lucy didn't pack a suitcase. She didn't rehearse a speech. And she certainly didn't plan to forgive him. But on a Thursday afternoon, with nothing but her pride and a scarf knotted too tightly around her neck, she walked through the Upper East Side and stopped in front of his building. The same doorman opened the door. The same elevator took her to the top floor. The only difference was the ache she now carried in her chest, and the silence that had stretched between them like an ocean. She rang the bell. Once. Twice. And just when she was about to walk away, the door opened. Nicholas stood there. He didn't look like the Nicholas from the magazines. His shirt was wrinkled. He's exhausted. But he looked real. And that was what broke her. "I'm not here for an apology," she said. He nodded. "I don't want a speech. I don't want promises." Another nod. She hesitated, then stepped closer. "I just need to know if it was ever real for you. Even a little." Nicholas didn't answer. Instead, he opened the door wider and said quietly, "Come in." The apartment hadn't changed, but everything else had. Nicholas sat on the edge of the couch, fingers laced, eyes downcast. "I messed everything up," he finally said. Lucy didn't deny it. "You did." He nodded. "But," she continued, "I think I messed it up too." He looked up. "I wanted so badly for it to be real," she whispered. "I didn't even ask you if it could be." Nicholas took a breath. "I told Olivia it wasn't supposed to mean anything," he said slowly. "But it already did." She blinked. "That's why I sounded cold. I was terrified. You were undoing me, Lucy." She swallowed. "I wasn't trying to." They sat in silence, the kind of silence that holds 1,000 truths. Then Nicholas pulled something from his pocket. Not a ring, not a contract. A single photograph. It was of Lucy, laughing. Natural, slightly blurry, taken from across the penthouse when she didn't know he was watching. "I kept this," he said, "even after you left." Lucy's hands trembled. He looked at her, and for the first time, there was no performance in his eyes. "I love you," he said. "And not because you fixed my image or fooled my father, but because you showed up when I didn't deserve it." She let the words hang there. She had waited so long to hear them. And now, they didn't need to be proven. They just needed to be felt. So she stepped forward, lifted her face, and whispered, "Then let's start again. No contracts, no pretending." Nicholas blinked. "You'd really come back to this mess?" She smiled. "Only if the mess has room for a unicorn t-shirt." He laughed, the kind of laugh that sounded like the start of something sacred. Then, without hesitation, he kissed her. And this time, it wasn't a performance. It wasn't even redemption. It was the answer. To be chosen, still. A year later, the wedding wasn't on the cover of a magazine. It wasn't viral. It wasn't trending. It was quiet, a garden behind the Scott estate, Lucy in a second-hand dress she chose herself, Nicholas in a suit he didn't care about as long as she was walking toward him. Mrs. Scott cried. Mr. Scott almost smiled. Whitmore made a toast that involved more tears than champagne. And Lucy? She stood beneath the arch of wildflowers, hands trembling, heart steady. When Nicholas read his vows, he said, "You weren't part of the plan, but you became the reason I never wanted one again." Lucy wiped a tear, then smiled through it and whispered, "I was never looking to be saved, I just wanted to be seen." He nodded, "And I've never stopped seeing you." The camera fades to a morning in their apartment, socks still scattered, coffee too strong, a unicorn mug next to a Wall Street Journal. Lucy narrates, "They say love is a choice, but maybe it's also a remembering of who you were before the world told you to perform. I didn't need a ring, or a contract, or a perfect life. I just needed someone to walk beside me, who knew when to hold on, and when to let go. Love didn't save me. It reminded me I was never lost." Fade to black. There was no music playing, no camera flash, no speech or toast or announcement to mark the moment Lucy Cooper realized she had healed. It happened quietly. One morning, while tying her shoe in the foyer of their shared apartment, Nicholas leaned down beside her, not to help, not to fix, just to match her pace. He looked up. She looked over. And in that silent, unfiltered glance, she saw it. He wasn't trying to save her anymore. He was simply choosing to stay. There's a kind of love that looks impressive in photos, glossy, expensive, strategic. But there's another kind. The kind that waits for you on the other side of a breakdown. The kind that forgives, slowly. That listens more than it speaks. that love doesn't shout. It remembers. Lucy never imagined she'd fall for a man like Nicholas Scott. Billionaire, strategist, scarred from a life of expectation. But somehow, between fake kisses and red carpet lies, she met the version of him no one else knew. The one who worried he wasn't enough. The one who never slept through the night. The one who, when no one was watching, reached for her hand just to make sure she was still real. And Nicholas? He never thought he'd fall for someone who wore unicorn t-shirts and corrected his grammar mid-argument. But Lucy taught him that vulnerability isn't weakness. It's the truest kind of strength. That the bravest thing a man like him could do was to love without control, without backup plans, without exit strategies. Just love. Their wedding wasn't perfect. The flowers were late. Her dress had a wine stain before the ceremony, and Nicholas forgot his vows and had to read them off a napkin. But they laughed. They danced barefoot in the grass. They kissed in the kitchen later that night, still in formal wear and elbow-deep in leftover cake. And when Lucy whispered, "I'm glad it wasn't perfect," Nicholas kissed her hair and said, "It was honest. That's better." If you've ever loved someone who didn't know how to stay, if you've ever been afraid that your heart is too soft for this world, if you've ever mistaken a contract for connection or a performance for partnership, then maybe you'll understand what Lucy and Nicholas learned. Love doesn't always arrive how you expect it, but it always asks the same thing. Will you stay when staying isn't easy? And if you made it this far, then maybe part of you is still waiting to be chosen. Not for your polish, not for your performance, but for your presence. So here's a question to carry with you. Have you ever fallen for someone before you knew it was real? If you have, tell us below. Let someone else scrolling by know they're not alone. Because sometimes the most powerful love stories aren't the loud ones. They're the ones that choose to begin again, even when no one's watching.